The Mimes horror box. What's worse than being watched? Being mimicked perfectly, silently, until you can't tell which one of you is real. Tonight's horror box isn't filled with puppets or toys. It's filled with something that looks exactly like you. Before we begin, subscribe to Halfway Dark. Every night I open a horror box, and every night someone wishes I hadn't. The story. When the box arrived, Megan assumed it was a prank. A cube the size of a laundry basket, sealed with black tape, sitting in the middle of her apartment when she came home. She hadn't ordered anything. No delivery slip, no label. Just one word written across the lid in block letters. Mime. The box was heavier than it looked. She dragged it into the living room, laughing nervously to herself. Who even sends something like this? But the moment she touched the tape, something tapped back 3 sharp knocks from inside the box. She froze. Then she heard breathing. She tore the tape open. Inside was a figure, curled up, painted white. Not a doll, not a mannequin. A mime. Its skin was chalk pale, its lips painted black, its eyes shut tight. It wore striped clothes, gloved hands folded neatly under its chin. It looked asleep until it opened its eyes. The mime sat up without unfolding its body, joints cracking as if it had been broken and hastily put back together. It stared at her, unblinking. Then it stood and mimed an invisible wall between them, palms pressing against air. Megan stumbled backward. Her breath caught when she realized it was moving exactly how she moved. When she raised her hand, it raised its hand. When she gasped, it mimed gasping. When she whispered, "What the hell is this?" Its mouth opened in silence, shaping the same words. Her reflection, but detached. That night, she locked it in the closet. She heard no sound, no scratching. But in the morning, her bathroom mirror was covered in handprints. White, powdery handprints smeared across the glass. Her phone showed videos she didn't remember, recording clips of her sleeping. Tossing in bed, a pale figure crouched in the corner behind her. Every clip ended the same way. The mime leaned into the camera, smiled, and pressed a finger to its lips. By the 3rd day, Megan could no longer trust herself. She walked into the kitchen and found herself already there, standing by the sink. Pale skin, black lips, striped clothes. Her double tilted its head and silently mouthed along with every word Megan spoke, always half a second behind. She screamed, and the mime screaming, its mouth stretching wider than humanly possible, splitting into cracks at the corners. When she blinked, it was gone. But the smell of grease paint lingered in the room. Sleep brought no escape. Every dream began in a box. She would wake in darkness, pressed against walls, unable to breathe. A mime would be there in the shadows, tapping invisible glass, miming suffocation, miming ropes twisting around her throat. She'd wake up gasping, only to find faint rope marks burned into her skin. On the 4th night, the box in her living room rattled again. Megan crept forward with a knife, heart hammering. She pried the lid open. Inside was herself. Not painted, not pale herself. Same clothes, same hair, same terrified eyes. The figure inside the box pressed its palms upward, lips moving without sound. Megan leaned closer. It mouthed one word, "Run." Behind her, the mime clamped a hand over her mouth. Her neighbors never saw Megan again. But some nights, they hear faint tapping through the walls. 3 sharp knocks. Sometimes they see a pale face through the window, smiling, lips painted black. And in the alley behind the building sits an unmarked box, always shifting, always waiting for someone curious enough to open it. That was the mime's horror box. Tell me, would you open a box labeled with your own name? If you survived this story, subscribe to Halfway Dark right now. Each night, another horror box appears, and each night the choice is yours. Open it or let it open you. Remember, silence doesn't mean safety. Sometimes silence is how it hunts. The marionette inside the horror box. Have you ever seen a puppet move without strings? I did, and I swear what it wanted wasn't applause. It wanted me. Listen carefully, because once you know how it moves, it starts looking for you too. Before we open this box, subscribe to Halfway Dark. Every story here is a key, and once you turn it, you can't lock the door again. The horror box arrived on a rainy Tuesday. No deliver man, no truck, just there on my doorstep, dripping wet. The wood was warped, the hinges rusted, the lid banded with iron nails that looked hammered by hand. Scrawled across the top in red was a single word: play. I should have left it alone. But curiosity isn't something you can turn off. I dragged it inside. It felt heavier than it should have been, like the wood itself resisted being touched. When I set it down, the whole apartment seemed to shift around it like the box had gravity. That's when I heard the faintest creak. Wood bending, strings tightening, and then laughter. I opened it. Inside was a puppet. A marionette carved from pale wood, its face painted with cracked white paint and a red grin carved too deep into the grain. Black hollows for eyes stared back at me, and tangled strings dangled from its limbs. It looked old, ancient, like it had been waiting for me. When I reached in, the wood felt damp, almost warm. I pulled it out by the strings and held it up. Its limbs jerked, head lolling. For a moment, I swore it shuddered on its own. I told myself it was just my nerves. But when I set it down on the table, the puppet sat up straight. That night, I dreamed I was on a stage, curtains drawn, an audience whispering in the dark. The marionette stood across from me, strings stretching into the void above. Except the strings weren't tied to its limbs, they were tied to mine. When I tried to run, my body moved like wood. My jaw clattered open and shut without sound. The puppet raised its hand, and mine followed. When I woke, my arms ached like I'd been pulled all night. And the puppet was no longer on the table. It was sitting in the chair beside my bed. I tried to get rid of it the next day, stuffed it back inside the box, slammed the lid, dragged it to the dumpster. I didn't care how heavy it was. I just wanted it gone. But when I got home, the box was already waiting in the middle of my living room, the lid wide open. The puppet sitting upright, strings coiled neatly in its lap. This time, its mouth moved. The jaw clicked open, then shut, the sound sharp and dry like cracking bones. And in a voice like splintered wood, it whispered, "Dance." I don't remember standing. My body just rose, stiff and unwilling. My arms lifted, jerky, like pulled by invisible strings. My legs bent and locked into place, and I moved, not gracefully, not human. Every motion was wooden, forced, as though I'd been hollowed out. The puppet leaned forward, watching with empty sockets, and every time its jaw snapped, my body bent. When it finally stopped, I collapsed to the floor, gasping. The puppet toppled, two limbs sprawled, but its grin seemed wider, like it had enjoyed the show. For days after, I couldn't escape it. Wherever I placed the box, it followed. Bedroom, kitchen, even the shower. I'd pulled back the curtain, and there it was on the counter, strings coiled like veins. At night, I heard it pacing, wooden feet tapping on the floorboards, slow and deliberate. Sometimes the strings dragged across the walls, leaving long scratches in the paint. And sometimes, God help me, I woke with strings tied around my wrists and ankles. Each morning, new bruises bloomed like fingerprints. I tried burning it, dragged it to the fireplace in the basement, lit a match, threw it inside. The puppet screamed. Not wood, not fire. A child's voice, shrill, endless, cracking with laughter and pain all at once. I watched as flames wrapped its limbs, paint blistering, strings snapping. For a moment, I thought it was over. But when the fire died, the puppet was still there untouched. Its head turned slowly toward me, and in that same splintered voice, it whispered again, "Dance." The night after, I woke standing on the stage again. Curtains closed, audience silent, but this time I wasn't alone. Dozens of marionettes stood in rows, identical, each one with strings leading into the black above. Their jaws clicked open and shut in rhythm, a chorus of snapping wood. And behind them, something larger moved, a figure in the shadows, pulling all the strings. I couldn't see its face, but I felt it smiling. When I tried to scream, my jaw only clattered, bone against bone. I've stopped leaving the box now. It sits in the corner of my bedroom, lid open, puppet inside. Every night, it watches. Every night, the strings feel tighter around my body, like I'm becoming part of it. I don't resist anymore, because I know the truth. The puppet isn't trapped inside the box. I am. If you've listened this far, you've already tugged at the strings. Subscribe to Halfway Dark before the box finds its way to your room, because once it does, you'll never stop dancing. The puppet in the horror box. They said never touch the box if it's already moving. But tonight, the one left outside your door is rocking back and forth, scratching from the inside. Do you open it or let it open itself? Before we begin, subscribe to Halfway Dark. Every night, I unseal another horror box, and the things inside never stay inside for long. The story: the box was lighter than Daniel expected. It was only the size of a shoebox, wrapped in plain brown paper, sealed with wax. Yet when he set it on the kitchen table, it rattled. Something inside shifted wood, knocking against wood. Daniel ran a hand over the seal. The wax impression wasn't a company logo or shipping mark. It was the outline of a handprint, pressed deep into the hardened surface. He should have thrown it away, left it in the hallway. But instead, he broke the seal. Inside, resting in a bed of shredded newspaper, was a puppet. Not a doll, an old marionette. Its strings were tangled, its face carved from cracked wood, its mouth a sharp slit, painted with a red smear of a grin. Its eyes were glossy black beads that caught the light like drops of oil. Daniel reached for it reluctantly, and the instant his hand touched its painted head, he felt a jolt like static shock, but deeper, running all the way into his chest. The puppet's head jerked sideways. The mouth opened, just slightly, and Daniel swore it, whispered his name. That night, the knocking started. Not on his door, not on the walls, but under his bed. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps again. Daniel leaned down with a flashlight, heart racing. The puppet was there, lying stiff in the shadows where he'd left it. But the strings were stretched taut, as though someone above the bed were holding them. The following morning, he woke with splinters in his palms. The puppet was sitting on his knitstand, head tilted toward him, red grin wider than before. Daniel barely ate breakfast. He dropped it back in the box, shoved it into the closet, and slammed the door. That's when he heard the creaking. Not from the closet, but from the ceiling. He looked up. The puppet's strings dangled through the air vent, swaying. Something above the ceiling tiles was pulling them, testing the slack. By the 3rd night, Daniel's apartment no longer felt like his own. The lights dimmed whenever the puppet sat in view. The mirrors reflected rooms he didn't own, stages, curtains, and rows of shadowy figures waiting in silence. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating. He started hearing it whisper again, not just his name this time, but sentences. Move your hands. Dance for me. We're almost ready. Desperate, Daniel cut the strings with kitchen scissors. The puppet collapsed in a heap of wood and fabric. Relief washed over him until the cut strings slithered across the floor like worms, crawling back into the joints of the puppet's limbs. One by one, its hands and legs lifted again, jerking upward. Invisible hands had taken control. Daniel bolted, dragging the horror box into the bathroom. He shoved the puppet back inside, taped the lid shut, and locked the door. The knocking started instantly. Inside the box, inside the walls, inside his skull. At midnight, his phone buzzed. No number, just a message. You're not the puppeteer. You're the puppet. The lights in the apartment went out. Strings dropped from the ceiling, wrapping around his wrists, ankles, neck. His body seized, yanked upright, his limbs forced into a grotesque marionette stance. He screamed, but his jaw was locked, clacking open and shut like wood. In the bathroom, the horror box burst open. The puppet crawled out, wooden limbs bending the wrong way, its grin stretching impossibly wide. It didn't climb toward him. It climbed into him. Splinters pushed under his skin. Joints stiffened. His movements were no longer his own. When Daniel looked in the mirror, the puppet stared back, strings vanishing upward into endless darkness. And behind him, in the reflection, an entire audience of faceless silhouettes applauded in total silence. That was the puppet in the horror box. Tell me, would you have cut the strings? Or would you let yourself perform? If you made it this far, you've survived another night inside Halfway Dark. Subscribe now, because tomorrow's horror box won't wait. And remember, sometimes you're not the one holding the strings. The final show inside the horror box. You find a sealed box left outside your door. The label only reads, "For tonight's show." Inside are masks, white gloves, and a program schedule that lists your name. The curtain is already rising. And once you open it, there's no turning back. Before the story begins, if you're brave enough to enter Halfway Dark, subscribe now. Every night, I open another horror box, and you don't want to miss what's waiting inside. The story. The package was square, heavy, and smelled faintly of grease paint and mothballs. Daniel kicked it lightly with his boot when he came home late from work, thinking it was something his neighbor had left behind. But when he leaned down to check the label, the air left his lungs. There was no return address, just a single sticker across the lid that read in block letters, "The final show, admit one." Daniel froze in his apartment doorway, box still resting against his shin. For some reason, his hand trembled as he reached down and carried it inside. The lid peeled open too easily, as though someone had already been in and resealed it. Inside lay folded black velvet cloth, white cotton gloves, and a mask painted in the style of a mime's face, but not a simple expression. The mouth was stretched far too wide, teeth carved individually in yellowed acrylic, as if frozen mid-scream. Daniel dropped it instantly. The mask clattered against the wood floor and rolled to face him, mouth open, eyes blank. Underneath the costume lay a thick folded program booklet. He flipped it open. His name was printed in the cast list. Under Act 3, in bold block letters, Daniel the Vanishing Man. He laughed nervously, though it came out hollow. It had to be a prank. Maybe some immersive theater group trying to recruit him. But the program had a date and time, tonight, midnight. And the location wasn't a theater. It was his own living room. At exactly 11:58 p.m., Daniel heard it. The sound of faint accordion music seeping through the vents. A high, reedy tune that made his stomach churn. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, climbing the stairwell of his apartment building. He looked at the door. The knob shivered. Something pushed against it, but not enough to open. Just enough to remind him it could. The lights flickered. The box on the table rustled. Daniel told himself not to touch it again. He told himself he'd throw it out the window and let it smash to pieces in the street. But when he blinked, the gloves were no longer inside the box. They were sitting on the couch cushions, palms up, waiting. The program shifted again, flipping its own pages until it landed open on the last line of the show. The print shimmered, almost wet. Curtain falls. The audience will never leave. The accordion music grew louder, though he couldn't tell where it came from. Daniel's reflection in the blanked TV flickered, not matching his movements. In the reflection, he already wore the mask. His phone buzzed on the counter. One new message. No number, just text. Put IT on. He grabbed the mask in a burst of anger and threw it across the room. But it didn't clatter. It didn't hit the floor. It vanished midair. And when he turned toward the mirror again, the mask was already clamped to his face. The white paint cracked around his vision, tightening like plaster. He clawed at it, screaming, but no sound left his throat. Only silence, perfect Mime silence. Behind him, the door groaned open. Figures filed in, one by one. Mimes, dozens of them, faces stretched into two wide smiles. Each held a program. Each program listed only one act. Daniel's. They sat cross-legged on his floor, waiting. The lights dimmed. A spotlight fell across him. The first act began. His own arms moved without his control, pulling invisible ropes, trapped in invisible boxes, banging against walls that weren't there. His body convulsed in exaggerated gestures, jerking like a marionette. The audience clapped in total silence, palms never touching. Yet the sound filled the room anyway. Hours passed or minutes, he couldn't tell. Time folded in on itself, looping the same routine over and over. Mime tricks he never learned, but performed flawlessly against his will. Each cycle, the faces in the crowd grew less human. Smiles widened, eyes melted into black pits, fingers elongated into chalk-white claws. By Act 3, he knew what the vanishing man meant. They weren't watching him perform. They were watching him disappear. His body began to fade, dissolving into the spotlight. He screamed voicelessly, hands clawing at the air. His audience leaned forward, ecstatic, shadows bending like predators. The last thing he saw before the light swallowed him was the program sliding across the stage. The next name printed beneath his own. Next performance. You? Outro. That was the final show inside the horror box. Tell me, would you dare put on the mask? Or would you run before the curtain even rises? If you made it this far, you're one of us now. Subscribe to Halfway Dark, and together we'll keep opening these boxes, no matter how cursed they get. Until next time, don't look behind you. The audience hates when you break character. The box of shattered laughter. Laughter is supposed to mean joy. But what if the sound you heard wasn't joy at all? What if it came from something inside a box, and once you hear it, you can never unhear it? This isn't just a story. It's a warning. Before we begin, subscribe to Halfway Dark. Every story here is a door. Once you open it, there's no going back. It began on a rainy Thursday. My neighbor across the hall dragged something heavy into his apartment. I wouldn't have noticed, except he kept dropping it thuds, echoing through the cracked plaster walls. Later that night, when I stepped out to toss my trash, I saw it for the first time. A box. Old wood, reinforced with iron bands. Sitting outside his door, like it had been abandoned. I froze because I swore I heard something inside. Not scratching. Not knocking. Laughing. Faint, broken, like a recording of children played backward. I leaned in closer without meaning to, and the box rattled. I backed away so fast I nearly tripped over my own bag. My neighbor's door opened just a crack, one pale eye peering through. "Don't listen to it," he whispered, then slammed the door. I barely slept. All night I heard the box through the walls. Muffled bursts of laughter, sometimes giddy, sometimes shrill. It echoed inside my skull like I was the one rattling around inside that wooden prison. By morning, the box was gone. I almost convinced myself I dreamed it, until I found footprints leading down the hallway. White powder smeared in childlike shapes, too small, too perfect. The second night, I came home late. As soon as I opened my door, I knew. The laughter was inside my apartment. I followed it, trembling, until I found the box in the corner of my living room. It wasn't supposed to be there. I never saw anyone carry it in. But there it was, wood, warped by age, iron bands groaning as it shifted. The laughter rose and fell, as though dozens of unseen throats were choking on jokes I couldn't hear. And then, silence. I thought maybe it was over, but the box lid lifted an inch, just enough for air to hiss out. I slammed it shut before it could open farther. My hands burned where I touched it, like the wood was fever hot. And then the box whispered. Not laughter this time. Words. Knock, knock. I shoved the box into my closet and locked the door. That night, I dreamed of faces, painted white, lips stretched too wide, each one staring at me through invisible glass, knocking, knocking, knocking. When I woke, my closet door was ajar. The box was sitting in the middle of the floor again. This time, it was already open. Inside wasn't darkness. It was a mirror, but not a clean reflection. My face was painted. White chalk across my skin, black diamonds dripping from my eyes. And my reflection was laughing. Not me, not my mouth. But the painted face in the glass cackled, silent at first, and louder until the sound filled the room. I slammed the lid shut again, but it didn't stop. The laughter bled out of the cracks, high-pitched, splintering, like glass breaking inside my skull. The third night, I tried to get rid of it, dragged it down to the dumpster behind the building. It felt heavier with every step, as though something inside was clutching at me. I heaved it in, slammed the lid, and staggered back inside. But when I opened my door, the box was already waiting in the living room, the lid hanging wide open, the laughter deafening, and something crawling out. They were small at first. Little hands, white as plaster, gripping the edge. Little heads pulling themselves free. Painted faces, red mouths stretched too wide. Their eyes were hollow, black pits where laughter spilled like smoke. One by one, they crawled into the room. Dozens, hundreds. Their laughter blended into a single scream of joy, so sharp it shredded the air. My lights flickered. My ears bled. And then, just as suddenly, they froze. Every painted face turned toward me at once. They opened their mouths in perfect unison and whispered, "Knock, knock." I don't remember what happened next. I woke up the next morning sprawled on my floor. The box was closed. My apartment spotless, as though nothing had happened. But I know it wasn't a dream, because when I looked in the mirror, I saw smudges of white paint around my mouth. And when I laughed, it wasn't my voice anymore. The ending. Now the box sits at the foot of my bed, always there when I wake up, always closer than it was the night before. I don't try to move it anymore, because I know what comes next. One night soon, the box will open, and I'll crawl out. If you're still here, you've opened a horror box too. Subscribe to Halfway Dark before the laughter spreads to your house, because once it does, it never leaves. The ice cream mime. What would you do if an ice cream truck parked outside your house at night, glowing red, with a mime behind the wheel who never blinked? This isn't just a story. It's a warning, and if you listen to the end, you might avoid what happened to me. Before we begin, subscribe to Halfway Dark. The deeper you go with us, the darker it gets. Every story opens a door, and not every door should be opened. It started on a Tuesday night. I was sitting in my living room, curtains half open, the TV droning in the background. That's when I heard it, the faint jingle of an ice cream truck. Not the cheerful looping melody I remembered from childhood. This one was wrong. Slowed down, warped, each note stretched, bent, as though the music box inside had been left in the rain, ears rusting and choking. I thought maybe I was imagining it. But then the headlights crept into view, washing across my wall in a sickly glow. The truck rolled to a stop right in front of my house. At first, I almost laughed. Who the hell drives an ice cream truck at 11:30 at night? But the laughter dried up when I noticed the glow coming from the windows. Not warm yellow light, not the sterile white of fluorescence. It was red. Every window of the truck fogged from the inside, glowing like a furnace was burning in there. And behind the windshield sat a mime. His face was painted chalk white, lips curved into a smile too wide, black diamonds dripping from his eyes like smudged ink. He leaned forward, pressing his face against the glass. His breath fogged the window further, but he never blinked. He just smiled. I stood frozen, remote still in my hand, my reflection caught in the TV screen, like I was watching myself from a distance. The jingle looped outside, broken, notes staggering like something limping along on a twisted leg. And then he raised his hand. Slowly, deliberately, the mime pressed his palm flat against the inside of the windshield, then dragged it downward. The glass squealed, fog streaking under his hand. I shut the curtain. That night, I didn't sleep. Every few minutes I peeked through the blinds. The truck was still there. Same red glow. Same figure. No movement. By dawn, it was gone. I told myself it was a prank. Maybe some edgy performance artist. Maybe even a dream. But when I left for work, I saw it. Smeared handprints on the pavement in front of my house. Pale, chalk white, too large to be normal. The second night, the truck came back. Same time, same place. This time, I didn't hide. I sat in the dark and watched. He didn't move for the first hour. Just sat there, face pressed against the glass, grinning. The red glow pulsed like a heartbeat inside the cab. Then the freezer door in the back slammed open. Not once. Over and over. Slam, slam, slam. I jumped with every hit. And each time, I swore I saw the whole truck rock slightly. Finally, I grabbed my phone. My hands shook as I dialed the police. The dispatcher's voice crackled. 911. What's your emergency? I explained. An ice cream truck. A man in mime paint. Parked outside my house 2 nights in a row. There was silence on the other end. Then the operator said flatly, "Don't look at him." Before I could ask what she meant, the line went dead. I threw my phone down like it had burned me. When I glanced back at the window, the mime was waving. Not a friendly wave. A slow, stiff movement like he was practicing pulling invisible ropes. And the freezer door behind him was still slamming. The third night, I boarded up my front window. Didn't matter. At 11:30, the music came again. Slurred, stuttering, reversed in places. The truck stopped outside. And though my windows were covered, the red glow seeped through the cracks like blood under a locked door. I heard it again, the freezer door slamming. Only now, it wasn't just one. Slam, then 2. Like there were many doors, all opening and closing at once. And then came the footsteps. Slow, dragging, circling my house. But the music never faded, which meant the truck never moved. Something had stepped out. I didn't sleep that night either. When I finally dared to look outside in the morning, the truck was gone. But my front porch was covered in footprints, not shoe prints, bare feet, painted white, each one too long, toes stretching unnaturally, like fingers. By the 4th night, I tried to leave town, packed a bag, grabbed my keys, heart hammering. I didn't even look outside, just bolted for the car. But when I opened my garage, the truck was inside. I don't know how it fit. It filled the entire space, umber scraping the walls, red glow flooding over me like I just opened an oven. The mime was closer this time, sitting not behind the wheel, but on the hood, waiting. He tilted his head when he saw me, then mimed licking an ice cream cone. Slowly, exaggerated, his tongue black, leaving streaks across his pale chin. Behind him, the freezer door swung open, and I swear, I saw something crawl out. A hand, pale and trembling, followed by an arm smeared in frost. A face half painted white, half frozen blue, eyes wide, silent mouth aping. Then another, and another, bodies crawling out, collapsing onto the hood, dragging themselves toward me. All dressed as mimes, all smiling. I slammed the door shut and ran. Didn't stop running until my lungs gave out, until the world blurred around me. When I finally stumbled home at dawn, the garage was empty, the driveway bare, but the freezer door in my kitchen stood wide open, and the floor around it was smeared in pale, chalk-white footprints. The ending, it's been a week now. The truck doesn't park outside anymore, but every night, at 11:30, I hear the jingle starting up again, somewhere farther away. Sometimes on my street, sometimes 2 streets over. Always moving, always searching. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear the slam of freezer doors. Louder, closer, multiplying. I know it's only a matter of time before the truck stops again. And when it does, I don't think I'll get another chance to run. If you're still here, you've already stepped inside the horror box. Don't leave now. Subscribe to Halfway Dark and join us before the mime finds another freezer door to open. The glass mime. The first time the glass cracked, it wasn't from outside. It was from the inside of my mirror. I heard it late at night, a faint tapping, like someone's fingernail scratching against glass. When I leaned in close, I saw it. A white glove, pressing back against mine. And when I froze, so did it. Tell me, if you saw a mime trapped inside your own reflection, would you keep staring? My apartment is small, boring, the kind of place with beige walls and squeaky pipes. Nothing supernatural, nothing worth talking about. But lately, the mirrors have been wrong. Not shattered, not warped, just late. I move, and my reflection hesitates. A split second behind me, like it's deciding whether to follow. I didn't notice it at first, but once you do, you can't unsee it. The box came next. Left in my bathroom sink, striped black and white, ribbon frayed, bow loose. I didn't touch it. But when I brushed my teeth, I saw my reflection's hand drift downward, fingers curling toward the faucet toward the box, while mine stayed frozen on the counter. It wanted to open it. It wanted out. The first rule of the glass mime is simple. Don't break eye contact. Because the second you blink, the second you look away, it moves on its own. I tested it. Stayed still, staring for what felt like hours, my eyes burning. And when I finally blinked, its smile was wider. I need you to understand something right now. This isn't just a story. This is a record. A warning. If I vanish, if the mime takes my place, you'll only know if you hit subscribe. That's the only way memory survives in places like this. Would you risk forgetting who you are? The glass mime isn't just rehearsing. It's studying. When I eat, it waits. Then copies me with slight differences, like it's improving the act, adding movements, pausing at moments I never did. When I sleep, I dream of it tapping on the mirror, pressing harder, cracking the surface with hairline fractures. And one night, I woke up to the sound of shattering. The bathroom mirror was broken. Shards glittered across the floor, edges sharp as knives. And on the largest piece, I saw a reflection. Not mine, his, face painted white, streaks of black under the eyes. Gloves spotless despite crawling through glass. He tilted his head and stepped out. You can't fight him. Every move you make, he copies. Faster, smoother, better. You throw a punch and he's already there, blocking it with invisible walls. You run and he runs with you, half a second ahead, cutting you off. He isn't following, he's leading. And you're the reflection now. The last rule? Don't ever look too long, because the longer you watch, the less you'll remember. Your reflection stops being yours. Your body stops being yours. And one night, you'll look in the mirror, and the mime won't be behind the glass anymore. He'll be standing where you are. And you'll be the one trapped inside. If you hear faint tapping tonight, don't lean in. Don't answer the knock. Because that isn't you in the glass anymore. That's him. And he's already rehearsing your smile.